Welcome to the Cowboy Office Show, where you'll experience expert analysis and epic discussion on key pillars of the equine industry, including sports, business, hobby, and the horse lifestyle. Your co-hosts are Jody Brainerd and Brian Dykert, industry veterans with over 120 years combined living the cowboy lifestyle. The Cowboy Office Show will help you get involved, ask more questions, and create change. We'll keep riding for you as together we learn from the ride already ridden, learn to listen better to our horse, and make our industry better for all. Each weekly episode will take a ride around the industry in less time than you can load the truck and trailer. Drop your email at cowboyoffice.com to receive weekly updates and never miss an episode. Saddle up as we ride into today's show.
Hello, Reining world. It all happened in August. A $3.5 million purse across a 9-day brand new cowboy sporting event. They say over 1,700 horses. Could it be a new cowboy tournament? A horse event like we've never seen before. Congratulations, 100X Classic. Welcome to the Cowboy Office. I'm Brian.
And I'm Jody. Welcome. You know, we thought we'd seen it all. Like horses continue to prove to us, just hang on, we haven't seen it all yet. What the 100X team just did, this event was nearly unbelievable. I got to go in person and see it for a couple days. Another milestone for the industry, and history continues to be made. This was incredible. The new 100X event in Tulsa, life after the Futurity's here.
It is. The new event tells us that the entry numbers are here. 172 entries in the 100X Open Futurity. It took 2 days to run it. 138 entries in the 100X Stakes, and it was for 4-year-olds only. One of the first times we've seen one of that magnitude. 2 days of qualifying to get to a finals, 2 sections of finals, 48 head in the first section and 27 head in the level 4 section of the finals. 92 horses in the 100X Invitational Futurity, which is for a select group that's basically focused around the junior sires of the industry, and 130 horses entries in the North American Reining Stakes Derby that's open to 4- and 7-year-olds that closed out the event. All of that's over 500 head of horses. So the days of just about the Futurity are definitely behind us. Yes?
Oh, absolutely. You know, and I sat down and I was thinking about this before we did the show, and several things, are evident, right? And the first one to me, from a trainer standpoint, old trainer standpoint, right, is that if you give young people good cars to drive, you're going to get your ass kicked, because these guys are essentially babies, and holy cow, are they good, and the next thing is that it's truly an international sport, right? I mean, we've got competitors from around the world. Right. I mean, the United States is by far the best country to be in, but you know what? These guys are coming here, and they are as good as it gets. And I think probably the last thing that's apparent to me is, thank God I don't have to try and find a horse to compete at this point. Good isn't good enough anymore, right?
Well, true, which I have this thought often, which is I'd like to be 25 or 30 again. But then right after that thought, it's a piece of reality of the opportunities would be cool, but I don't know because I think your point's highly valid. While the horsepower is out there, the hard work to get to the level, to get to the top is not any different than what it's ever been, other than there's more of it. So am I somewhat on target?
Absolutely, without question. It was fun to watch them and fun to be part of it, just from a spectator standpoint, right? And fun to talk about this show, because it wasn't just a competition, it was a show. Yep. I mean, as in Hello Las Vegas type thing, crazy.
Yeah. Honey, let's go to dinner and a show.
Right, yeah. Exactly. That's what it was. It was awesome. But we have to say, big thanks to that 100X, the owners and the show producers, along with all the staff that made it happen.
Yeah, without a doubt. What a pleasure it's been to work with this group, their entire staff. Thank you so much. They truly have a vision to move the industry forward. That's now obvious. doing it different and better in every form. Many of our event producers make it way too hard to work with them and promote and discuss and analyze the industry. And I got to tell you that the 100X owners, producers, all the staff that we here at the Cowboy office mingled with and dealt with, they were all an overwhelming pleasure to deal with. And we really appreciate it. And so thanks to all of them, and kudos and hats off. And why the industry makes it so hard, I don't know. I still get a little bit lost in that whole place. And it's like they don't want more people to play the game, and I don't understand that one. So maybe it's just the fundamental difference between a business and a club. I don't know. 100X owners and staff, thank you again. Outstanding work. We really appreciate it, and we know that the industry does as well. Go to cowboyoffice.com, put your email in, join us as this ride is getting better every episode and every event. We welcome and enjoy all your feedback, your comments, and by all means, ask us the hard questions. We're going to jump right in and take a look at a few winning runs here, because that's kind of, this is the big shot. This is looking at the overall function, and we'll get to the impact in a minute, but we're going to look at some of the runs. Congratulations to all those competitors that made purse payout distributions. All of them are certainly winners. Sometimes, like I just said, Jody, sometimes I wish I could be 25 or 30 again. But anyways, because in our day, there was only 4 or 5 2,000 added trophy Reinings, and everybody went to those few, and that's all there was. So could you imagine if you were at home trying to, do I go to the 100X or do I not?
Right. I remember those days, and I also remember that, sometimes that $200 entry fee was hard to come up with for those $2,000 added Reinings, right? Yeah. Oh man, it's it's crazy. The times have changed so much. If we won $5,000, we thought we killed a fat hog. I mean, it was huge money, and of course, my first dually also cost $12,000 too, right? So it's 120 now. So times are changing, but no, it's crazy what's available to young and old riders also, just across the board.
And owners and breeders and all the rest of that. And we did that show with the North American owners, and I've always had this question and a little concern about how much the breeders can actually support, and it appears that it's working well. So I give them all credit. And then the second piece is it's the breeders that are actually the backbone of what's enabling the industry to build the purses that they are. And the more those programs and these kinds of events are now materializing and coming to the market, it just opens so many more doors of opportunities. And I don't care if you're an owner, if you're a rider at whatever level, a breeder, just an enthusiast that enjoys what our sport has to offer. The opportunities are becoming more and more abundant, and I truly am enjoying that part.
Oh, I can't say enough about it, and we'll get into this more later in the show. But just because you're on that topic right now, because we've done this so long, but the payouts at this particular show were so incredible and so deep that it gives people incentive to want to continue to do this. I mean, it's like, you get owners, okay, heck yeah, let's go play again. And you know what? There was a time that was not happening.
Well, correct, because there was only one. It was called Who Won. Now you got multiple winners. Let's pull up the winners chart, because we're going to go across this event real quick. It's not the entire payout. This is just those that won their aged event. So right at the top, because the 100X Futurity, the Open Futurity, the event started with that. 4 levels. Cade McCutcheon wins it, riding all-night partier. And this chart, we just put it together here at the Cowboy office because he marks at 230, 223.5. We give you the spreads. We show it to you. Pays 24,000, pays 15 places. Level 3, Josiane Gauthier from North Carolina, originally from Quebec. Phenomenal young horsewoman, wins the level 3. And Debbie Brown, we've known for a long time, wins the level 1 and 2. Congrats to all of them. And you can look at the scores. They're, 218s, 217.5s, 223.5 to win the level 4. The 100X Stakes has 4 levels in it. And again, like we said, you had to qualify through the go-around, get to the finals. Level 4, Gabriel Borges riding 007. We're going to take a look at that run. Phenomenal. 232, pays $150,000. And now comes, where is 100X doing it better and different? They're paying 25 spots, which means if you made the finals in your level of eligibility, the probability of getting a paycheck was extremely high because you had to just keep her on pattern. And level 3 gets a 3-way tie. Gabe riding TR designer jeans, Josh Tishman, Magnum with attitude, and Martin Mulestetter with Spooks Ghost Rider. All marked 226s across that entire finals. They split $120,000. So $40,000 apiece, and again, paying 25 places. So all the finalists get paid, and I give a lot of kudos to the 100X production company because these guys, it makes a difference. And yes, level 2, Luca Fapani, we've been talking about him all year. Rookie pro coming up through the ranks. Diane Yoder owned that horse. Gonna Chick Dream marks a 223.5 for level 2. And pay attention to Edward wins the level 1. Pale Face Blazing, 219.5. You know, that's 73.2 on an average, and that pays $20,000 to win it. And again, pays all 25 winners. But if you take that $20,000 to win the level 1 and compare it to NRHA Derby, level 1 paid $10,000 to win it. This is double and deeper. And then we show you the Invitational Futurity had 90-some head in it. Andrea Fapani wins it. Inferno 35. There's been a lot of promo out there. That's paying 15 spots. And then the North American Reining Stakes, which is that was a local breeders program that's now making it to the national stage. They actually had 10 different divisions inside that Derby, but we're just highlighting the 4 levels. Fernando wins with a 231.5. Level 3, Cole Price on Ice Face. Level 2, Clemerson wins it with a 224.5. And look at level 1 in the North American Reining Stakes Derby. Level 1, Kaylee Argentero wins it with a 220.5. I mean, that's just anyways, I just think it's great. It's a great thing to watch. It's a great thing to be a part with the industry. So we just wanted to bring that up for everybody's attention.
It's incredible, and it's so good for the sport, right? I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah. So we're going to take a look. We'll start right out. Let's watch Gabriel. Gabriel on 007 wins the 100X Stakes, hands down, bar none. Now, this is one of mine because if there was a run that was going to break the score of 80 in my book, this is it. So talk to us, Jody. Whoa.
Well, you know, I didn't get to see this horse live. I only got to watch him on the tape. I mean, I heard Chelsea talking about him because she was so excited when the scores came up, right? And first maneuver for me, there's only one spot to put it. It's excellent, without question. That's a 1.5 for me.
Uh-huh. I agree. It's excellent.
Yep. So we get our first set of turns, and there's 2 spots for that, either very good or excellent. I go +1, called it very good. Mm-hmm. You 1.5 it, call it excellent. I have no issue with it at all.
Yep, I would have.
Yeah.
Because the precision was so and the only one difference here to the left is because you saw him migrate just a little bit to the south. So I would have 1.5 the first one and 1 the second one.
Right, and I won and halved. Okay,
yep.
I mean, I called it good, and I struggled with it. But if you won it, I've got no issue with it. There's only 2 spots it can possibly be, and they are credit earning, or you know.
And I think that's really the answer. There's 2 spots, right. So pick one of those. Here we are off into the first big fast circle, and I'm telling you what, right? I mean, that's excellent there.
Yeah, I mean, it's in large fast circles. I mean, it's. I keep saying, how can they get better? I mean, but that's as good as it gets. I think the slow smalls weren't probably as dynamic, but I don't know if this horse looks so good and so balanced. He might not be real good at moving slow. I don't know, because he just kind of keeps him at a nice pace. But I mean, they're still very good circles for me. I mean, I don't call them excellent because the slow small for me was not as good as the large fast, but I still call them very good.
Right. And that's the difference between you and me. And I would have 1.5 them, and you would have either half or won them. Yeah. Got it.
Right.
Again, you're back to the 2 boxes. This right set of circles, and you just saw him. He had to steer and kind of be a little bit quick with him coming across the middle because he wasn't fully trusting that horse. So we're still earning credit, but just not as powerful as the left was.
Right. And I think probably that where he had to steer coming across the middle a little bit, and I only have my half-point increments to work with, and he's pretty far off center right here, so I drop him to – I still call him good. Yep. I just call him plus halves.
Yep.
So.
And I agree with you. I would have done the same thing for the same reasons. And now he turns around and talk about an acceleration.
Yeah. And I mean, and willingly guided. And this horse, when he goes to the ground and rolls back, I +3. I mean, it's like, I can't, it's like double a 1.5. I don't know. I mean, there's only one spot. I think it might be the best maneuver I've ever seen, individual maneuver I've ever seen. That approach, stop, and right rollback.
I completely agree. And if you ever want to see a phenomenal, excellent rollback, that was the best example we've seen in a long, long time. And this one's good, and it's really good, but it's not as dynamic as that right one was. So in my book, that was a 1.5 on the right and a 1 on the left.
Agreed. I marked exactly the same thing.
And there's just so many things. But if you watch this horse's balance, this horse's frame, everything that Gabriel asked this horse to do, what I'd like to see is the right rollback in half speed, if you could. And just for the audience sake, because if anybody out there is riding reining horses and you want to know what a real rollback is and want an example of an excellent rollback is, here we come. Because, and again, I from the first stop and back up, because this horse's balance and quality of motion and control is so high and so outstanding. It's just phenomenal. Go ahead.
No, I just said, and the willingly guided, this horse ran as hard to the last stop as he did the first stop coming in the pen. He didn't question. And it takes a phenomenal horse to not ask a question when they know they're going to stop that fourth time, right? It's like, I know it's coming. And if he lengthened and he said, I'm going.
There's obviously a big bond between Gabriel and this horse, and he showed it at the end of that run too, because he actually kind of like did the bow to his horse, right. Which he and that horse were so dialed in that I don't. Anyways, that's just me. And in my little book, I would have loved to have been marking that horse, because then that would have given me the shot to truly use the top end of the scale. In my book, I had that horse a little bit over an 80 because the quality was so high on all the dimensions that we've seen and talked about.
You talk about forming a bond. If I had him, he'd be in my bed or I'd be sleeping in his stall. It's like, holy mackerel. I just want to go get on him and stop him like once just to, know what it feels like.
Yeah. Let's bring up his scorecards. And so what we've done with a couple of these runs, here's his scorecards. These are the official cards reformatted through the Cowboy office. It's not about what individual. It just shows you the 5 scorecards. So it's actually quite interesting. And the point to this, and there's his scores. He goes from a 77 to a 78. So it's only a 1-point spread. They're all looking at the same thing. This is all about how good. Your right set of circles that we talked about, Jody, you and I were +half and +1. They have 1, 0, and 4 +halves. So the +halves dominated that right circles, which is exactly what you were talking about. The yellow bar in the left rollback is the interesting one. The other piece to this chart is the green boxes show where plus 1.5s were pulled off the officiating system per maneuver, which means the first maneuver stop and back got 2 plus 1.5s. The right spins got 1 plus 1.5. Then the left rollback gets 1 plus 1.5, 3 ones and 1/2. And again, why was that? You can see that the right rollback got all 5 ones. I would have told you that those are 1.5s. And then again, your stop and hesitate gets 1, 1.5, and 4 ones. I would again told you, and you and I would talk about that, right?
Yeah, there's no question about that. And it's like, if you read the description of maneuver evaluation, it says excellent, right? It doesn't say perfect, it says excellent.
Yep.
And excellent defines that last maneuver, the first one, right rollback. To me, it's without question, right? Yep. I mean, that excellent, there's no other place to put it. So.
Yep. And I would have included the right spin, and that's exactly so, and which is the finer distinctions. I would tell you that these fundamental scores being within a point, they all were looking at the same thing. And this is where you and I in the Cowboy office continue to try and help the industry to understand, because when they see the final scores, they all get a little bit goofy. Here's the answer. And so it's just as clear as it can be. So this was one of the runs that our industry, we've been yearning for this, and I can't believe that we saw it. And then number 2 is this is where we're going, and I think we're going to see more of these kinds of runs, and our officiating system's got to be ready to make the fine distinctions, because that's where we're going.
Absolutely.
So we're going to take a look at, now we're going to watch Fernando Salgado. He owns and shows this horse, I believe, Extra Wimpet Good. Now this is a different pattern. This is the one that wins the North American Reining Stakes. So you had pattern 12 that we just watched with Gabriel, and this is pattern 9.
Right. And and we don't compare horses to horses, but this horse is not quite as free in front when he goes run and stop. I still think it's a very good. I plus 1'd it, but it's not a 1.5 excellent for me. Mm-hmm.
This thing can turn.
Again, right? Yeah, absolutely. And again, I called it very good. Plus 1.
Yep. And again,
plus 1. Yep.
Yeah. The precision is
Yes.
very high. The control is high. The finesse is there. The degree of difficulty is there. They're very good. Now we're going to go lope. And this is small, slow, too big, fast, because this is pattern 9. And I'll tell you what else, right? The genetics in these horses are coming so far, because these things can lope slow and then gallop. I think the frame and the acceleration of the rundowns and how they are, that's where we are. This is very good.
Yes, I agree.
And the maximum degree of difficulty on that maneuver was right there across 3 strides. And so,
it really was. I took a look at that, and I was being awful picky, center chair. I mean, he hung a little bit to the inside, position loss, but the downward transition was so dynamic. I called him very good again. I mean, plus 1.
Yep. Yes, but that's the detail, and I think that that's valid.
Yep.
So that people know that we're all paying attention to that.
Right.
And we're doing something with it.
Right. We're going to give credit where it's due, so
Yep.
It's like...
Yep. And
What'd you think about second set, Ryan?
I didn't think that they were good. Personally, I would have plus one them. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, and I did too. I also called them that, +1. I agree.
Good stopper and good rollback.
Right. Good.
Yes.
I called it half. He's not quite as good in front, but I mean, still a dynamic stopper. I mean, don't get me wrong here. I mean,
he's earning credit. It's about the degree
absolutely.
of how much.
Yeah. Approach is good.
And that was about. It was fine, but that was just a casual. That was the casual rollback.
Yes, casual. Good description. I called it good, plus half.
Yeah, I did too. For that reason.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. And then again, what I want you to do is pull up the scorecards to this one. Because this one, now it was the next day. It was with the same batch of judges. So the same batch of judges did the finals for the stakes and the North American Derby. Now, the North American Derby had 130 head of horses. And if I remember right, Fernando was like draw 51. He was almost right slap in the middle of that draw. So was it about the draw? The answer would be no. The thing that's very interesting is you're talking about a 2.5 point spread on this run. He goes from a 75.5 to a 78, but he pulls 278s. And so then the other three are right in that middle range for the reasons that you and I just elaborated. But when you compare it, because when we talk about it as an industry, this was a 231.5 run that's a 0.5 point different than what we just saw with Gabriel. Not the same pattern. It's hard to compare it, apple to apple, but when you're measuring the industry and what our officiating says against the competition, I do think that there's a lot of valid points in here. So this shows it to you. Point is, this run only pulls 2 individual 1.5 maneuver scores. It was in the left circles and the right circles, which very understandable. Kind of an obvious, that would be a great debate. In the right set of circles, for the reason that you and I marked it slightly less than the left. The left were excellent. The right were not as excellent, but you can see that he goes from correct to excellent on one maneuver. And then the same thing is true on the stop and hesitate, the last maneuver. He goes from correct to very good, which is the point spread at the maneuver level, that's why when the spectators see the difference in the scores, that's the why, which is about degree of quality. And the bottom line to the official score is a 231.5, which averages to a 77.2. And that would compare to a 232, which averages to a 77.3. 0.5 point difference in our standard scale, 1/10 of a point difference in a decimal scale. It's where our industry is. Good for all of them.
Yeah, it is. It's fantastic. And I like I said, you can't hardly back to back those because the pattern was different. But you had some common maneuvers too. I mean, you had a run in, stop, and back up, and you had some. You had 3 stops on the sides and right rollbacks. And I personally had, I had Gabriel just on individual maneuver evaluations. I felt like there was a 1.5 to 2 points difference between those 2 runs on evaluation quality. But I mean, I had marked Fernando 77. I mean, I was 1.5 higher on the other horse. So it's, I mean, it's phenomenal.
Yep. Yes. I think it illustrates a few things. One is where our sport is going. That's going to become the top end, and that's what it's going to take to win and play at the top. That's not new news. The last couple of years has been proving that across our aged events. I think that's really good. Now comes the rest of the story, because all the decisions that the consumers have to make on all the things that they do in our industry to try and get to the top, that's one big point. And the other big point is our officiating system. And I know I hound on this all the time. But if our sport is going to move where it's trying to move to, which puts economics way high on the list, because we're now talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. We're now talking about millions of dollars. They're now touting next $1 million earning levels. In our time, we saw one person in our time reach $1 million earnings. His name was Bill Horn. They're now, I don't know how many there are, but it's becoming somewhat common.
Sure.
I'm not trying to take away from it, because great for them, great achievements. My point is the real economics to it, and as in all sports, it's the clarity between officiating and competition. And it's an area, this isn't about people, this is about systems and applications of systems, and then why do people do the things that they do when they're in those systems. And so my big question becomes, because if you take Fernando's ride, obviously tells us that there are some gray areas that you can go either way in those two boxes. Gabriel's ride says it's pretty clear the bulk of those are on the very good to excellent. That's the difference, which is where the sport's going. On the ability for the officiating to make those distinctions, it's easy for you and I to do it here, and we just pull those two runs up. It's a different story when you got 75 horses in 2 sets of finals crossing an entire day. And if you talk about the North American, they had no idea how many entries that was going to end up being, and it turns out to be 130 head of horses. They had to start that thing early just so that they could get it done and completed in one day, because they had no other choice.
Right.
So that's a significant demand on the officiating system to perform at the same level that the competitors are going to come at it. So my big question in there is it time for us as an industry to start looking at how do we create an independent officiating system that has a number of things in it that I would tell you the sport is asking for, but they don't know how to ask. Do you have a take on that?
First of all, I would start by saying something that I've, said many, many times when I chaired the judges committee for 5 years. I would always tell, my committee members, and if I monitored a major event, I said, our job is to make sure that the right checks go to the right people. To simplify it, right? The right checks need to go to the right people. And I think, and this is not against the judges, I think, because they're working, like I also say many, many times, people don't err on purpose, right? At that time, you're doing what you think is correct. But from the training standpoint, from the tools that you have to work with, those mistakes are becoming more commonplace with the level of horses that we are seeing now. So I think that probably these top runs, I think they nailed them. I think there are some pretty defendable examples of horses that went earlier in go-rounds, and then when the final started at night, maybe didn't get the check that they were supposed to get because they weren't marked back-to-back with some of those horses later on in the evenings. That's just, I saw it, and like I said, numbers, if you pulled the runs and compared them, like I said, it's very defensible. So yeah, there's definitely way time for improvements, and from the independent judges management system, like professional sports, without question, it's time for it. And you and I have discussed this at length over years and years, and we've got a way to do it, and it's absolutely it's time for it.
Well, it can be. The question isn't, can it be done? Because yes, it can be done. It's really, as an industry, is it time for it to be done? And does the rest of the industry demand or expect the same? That's the bigger question, because there's this, I know this, many know this. In our time, you used to be frowned upon if you were a professional official. if all you did was make your living by officiating, that was a frowned upon position to be in. The officials were a side shoot of other professionals from the industry. Is that not a somewhat fair statement?
Yeah, absolutely. It meant that you couldn't make a living training a horse, so that you had to go be a judge, right? And absolutely the farthest possible thing from the truth. I mean, it's like we've had some, we have, obviously it helps if you had the opportunity to ride one of these things, right? I believe that fully. Mm-hmm. But, in professional sports, there are a lot of times the best officials in the National Football League never played professional football, right? I mean, they didn't. Right. So, and they're excellent at what they do.
Correct. And that's where I agree with you wholeheartedly. And that's where I think our sport now is. And so the need to now look at it and manage it and address it differently. Do I think the bulk of our sport and industry has now been, it's coming well from the horse exhibitor, competitor, owner, economics, good purses, good prizes, good judges. We've figured that stuff out. Now comes, you got events. I think we got a few things. One is there room for weekend horse shows? Of course. And do they need to continue to serve? Is there room for tournaments and or sporting events? And can the sport of reining be spectator friendly? Yes, it's been proven. Does the officiating need to now elevate to those same levels? And that answer is yes as well. And that goes to this one because the advancement of our sport is going to demand, I question this. One of my concerns is how many times can you ask the bulk of the industry to keep paying the bill and they feel like they're getting shorted by the officiating? And so can you educate them? Yes, because feelings is an emotional status, but the reality of the objective analysis is where that piece is. And an independent judges system that now puts a wall, like what you talk about with football, because the players, the owners, the coaches, the league, and the officials are all components that go into that sport, but they're all separate spokes that make up that same wheel, and we're just at the beginning of that. That's my sense.
And I couldn't agree more. And I think that, you and I gave years to the National Reining Horse Association. I mean, we did, and
yes, we did.
I would not change one thing about it. I would do it over again. I mean, absolutely. That's not a. I mean, it was. It's like
all that gray hair. I think.
Right. Exactly. You were the one that's crazy enough to be the president, right? It's like, but and NRHA. It's always, and I love the association. It's enabled me to be where I'm at right now, because without it, I wouldn't be here, right? So anyway, it's awesome, but just like, you've experienced it firsthand, and I have too, and this is not beating up this association, but it always, because I love it, but there's always conflict in it, because you have a board of directors that makes all the decisions that isn't paid for. And these guys come in and they do the best job that they possibly think that they can do. But there's so much, it's a self-serving industry. It's a self-serving business because it's by nature to want what's best for you. But sometimes it's not what's best for the overall sport itself, right? I mean, wanting what's best for you, you need to want what's best for overall. And I can remember years when I'd say, you know what, here's a really good idea. Let's try to implement this. And I would have professionals tell me, no, it's a bad idea and we're not going to do it. And it would get voted down. And then, 2 years later, we'd finally get it passed. And it was the greatest thing that ever happened. But it took 2 or 3 years to get that point across because you have so many different levels of opinion. And the officiating is no different than that. I mean, you got guys that everybody thinks that they're really good at what they do, and they are. But you have to take an overall look at what's now needed and not be defensive about or threatened by an opinion that someone else may have. And that's what always gets in the way, and has always and will continue to do so. So, yeah. Anyway,
Yeah, no.
sorry about that. It's like,
No,
I got off on but,
Well, I asked.
Right.
I asked, so that, no, thank you. And I appreciate that. And I'm sure our audience does as well. The conflicts, the vested interest, our organization, how it's set up and structured. One of my our desire for this sport to become a real sport and then have all the feeding lines. Should everybody be exposed to riding reining horses and try it? Yes, they should. Why wouldn't we? And then how many of them can come up and make a living out of it and all the rest of that stuff? Without a doubt, I'm with you all the way through all of that stuff. I question ourselves now, and I too, like you, I've made a complete life out of this particular sport. And yes, I gave a lot to the association that governs us and all the rest of that stuff. And it doesn't mean that I don't respect it for all of those things. But at the same token, it's like being barn blind. That was one of the hardest lessons. One of my biggest weaknesses was the selection process, the prospect process, because I would always see too much good and I couldn't be truly objective. It's being barn blind. It's that same scenario. Well, our association's guilty of some of that as well. So we get the luxury of kind of talking about that a little bit. I'm going to move us up just a touch because I want to go up and let's talk about the bigger impact, because this 100X event is truly one of a kind. I hope it's here to stay. I don't know where their ultimate goal is. They just put out a press release that they're going to have a $2.5 million purse, multiple different divisions in May in Fort Worth. So obviously 100X and the company and the production of events is going somewhere. Obvious. God bless them. I wish them all the best. I love what they've started with. But let's talk about just a touch. What's your sense on what's the obvious big impact of what this 100X events just made on the industry? Is there something obvious to you like it is to me?
Well, I think so. But first, like I said, I have to give them a little bit more credit, because having experienced it firsthand, I would just like to say that, first of all, the amount of outside of the box thinking, which I like to consider myself a way outside the box thinker, right? That went into this show was incredible. First of all, just the thought process that say, hey, let's try this, let's do this, this is what we're going to do. I think that's was crazy good. And secondly, Chelsea, she can, I'll promise you, verify this, but the amount of work that went into this event to make it run as smoothly as it did for its premiere, I can't believe it. I mean, it's incredible. But what it's also told me is that and this is I'm using NRHA as the example, because NRHA is the Futurity, the Derby, still huge major events. The Futurity is like everybody goes and shows, and but this one showed us probably that now it's just parts, right? NRHA is just a part of this. I mean, it's no longer, I don't want to say the big dog, but I'm just saying that there are some, Brumley Management, we've got this 100X, it's changing.
Yes, it's changing. And I would say it's changing for the better. And Absolutely. It's changing for the better by outside forces that want the good for the whole. And I'm not being judgmental. Those are fundamental. But Teton Ridge and what they're doing with the American Performance Horsemen, because they have published and put out press releases that they've signed with Arlington for another 3 years. So we're going to see some form, because they're combining rodeo, cow horse cutting, and reining into a major cowboy event. Got it. Good for them. Keep going. But they've published the fact that they've signed for 3 years, so we're going to see some form of that. The Run for the Million is now 4 years old. They sold out that arena multiple nights in less than 30 minutes. Well, that's never happened in our sport. That happened this year, which is Taylor Sheridan and Amanda Brumley and Brumley Management, that whole production entity. That's phenomenal, which just emphasizes the fact you and I put a lot of work into this 10 years ago, because the question was, is the sport of reining spectator friendly? The answer is yes, all day long. We always believed that, but what did Run for the Million do has now proved it. 100X is going to a whole nother level. That's why I bring up the tournament concept. And I agree with you, because now you're talking about the sport. And is it dependent on just any one of those spokes? And my answer would be no, because you got multiple spokes that have the desire to make it better, that if they all keep doing what they're doing, the entire sport's going to keep moving up and onward. So there's nothing but good there.
No, there's not. It's like you remember the old Field of Dreams movie,
yes.
Right? If you build it, they will come. And guess what?
I have to regress for just touch, because I used that one when I built the first horse show complex in North Carolina, because it was supposed to fail. And I just knew this industry maybe too well, but that was the no-brainer. And I used that as a main tactic, because my reflexes told me one thing while all the other forces said something different. And it proved to be true, because that facility went on to become a major facility in the Mid-Atlantic area. So I won't take us backwards, but you just stimulated, because
it was great.
Yeah. You build it, they will come, and then you got to just run it. You got to have the quality game for them to play. And is our game also, do you want to play? Is it fair? Can you get rewarded? And then can a spectator enjoy it as well? And those answers are all yes.
Absolutely.
So I saw, this is the thing that 100X showed to me, which I thought was phenomenal, because we saw it all at the same time. I was overly excited with this event coming to play for a lot of reasons, but the big one was because the 3-year-olds, the next batch of Futurity horses in August, that's going to be your real first test of seeing what the next crop kind of looks like. And so, in our day, it used to be the summer slide in Denver. So Futurity horses, here's what was obvious to me. Our industry has now got several factors in it. You got the weekend horse show versus age events versus major sporting events versus 100X and what they're doing. Great. But the obvious one I saw is the difference between what our level of horses are doing. Futurity horses was everything our world was about in our time, Jody. And now it's only one of the steps. The pressure for the last 5 years to create a 4-year-old only event, 100X proved it. Was it needed? Yes. Is it supported? Yes. Is it phenomenal? Yes. And are the 4-year-olds different than 3s, and are they different than 6, 7, and 8s? Yes. And so that was the one, because the 100X Stakes is a 4-year-old only. And you're talking about 100 and, what do we have? 138, 140 head of 4-year-olds only. I just thought it was phenomenal. And then the North American is a derby that's open to 4 to 7-year-olds. And we saw another 130 head of horses. That, to me, was the biggest obvious that came out of this thing. And I just think it's phenomenal, because our industry has actually grown to the spot that you and I and many others, Bill Horn, Bob Loomis, Dick Papers, all of them, because we used to talk about it and dream about it, but all we had was Futurity, one event.
Right. It's crazy, but we've talked about that 4-year-old to 4-year-old event many, many times, and it's people would try it a little bit, couldn't make it work, but here's what always happened. They'd add a 4-year-old division maybe to the Derby, and people would they're going to go enter everything. The great thing about this is, and in May, you're really talking about 5 months after the Futurity or a few months after the Futurity. It's not like 4-year-olds are still essentially Futurity horses, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, they're a few months after that. But what this does is it gives people the option of saying no to the Derby with a 4-year-old, right? Because we've got enough 5, 6, and 7-year-old horses now. I mean, we were short for a while, but our numbers say that Derby can be just as big and even better than it has been without 4-year-olds. And if you still want to take one there, you can. But it gives people the option now of saying, you know what, here's what we're going to do. We're going to save this. We're going to go to this 4-year-old event, and we'll go to the Derby as a 5-year-old. And I think that's way good thinking from a horse standpoint.
Yeah, and I agree with you. That was the other piece that came out of the obvious steps that the 100X displayed for our industry. And my hope is, I was a late bloomer myself, so maybe I still haven't bloomed. I don't know.
Yeah.
But the point is, we didn't have the time in our time. You now have the time. Riders and horses can be developed over time. You can move at the individual schedule, and there is a lot to be had, which is the opportunities. And to me, that's the bigger stuff that I saw glaring come out of this event. It's just phenomenal. And again, I can't say thanks to the 100X crew, owners, staff, everybody that was involved. Great idea, great production, and God bless them and keep going.
Yep, absolutely.
Let's talk for just a touch about, there was another interesting piece that came out of this, and you're a big proponent about a handicapping system of some sort, and it really leads to the rule in our sport that allows riders to ride up to 3 horses in a given event. And so with the leveling, and we've talked a lot about the various leveling components, but really you've been a proponent about some sort of handicapping, because the dominance on horse flesh to competition has been the factor. And your point's always been that if you limited those riders, to Run for the Million's a great example, because it's a rider qualified, they get to pick whatever horse they want. Not a problem. And they have a lot of latitude, which is the old substitution stuff. But this breeders programs that we just watched seems to be a little bit of a form of a self-handicapping system, yes?
And it just proves the point. I mean, it's like the handicap system that I talked about, and I'm in handicap, whatever. I always maintain that you can't handicap on ability, right? A person's ability. You can't stop me from showing because you think I'm too good, right? I mean, it's like, it's like we have to figure out a different way. But the reason that you have dominant top 20 riders is because they have access to the best race cars, right? And I've said this before. So they're riding the best horses, and there was no more spot that was evident than at this horse show, this last one, this 100X, that if the guy's got the horse to ride, they'll come and kick your butt. It don't matter who they are. It doesn't matter if you've heard of them before. It doesn't matter if they're $1 million rider or not. They'll beat you. So, but what I've always maintained is that the true way to handicap is not that $1 million, and the Run for a Million. They're not unhappy about having to ride one horse. They're still there running as hard as they possibly can on one. But if you have a $10 million rider, you say you're riding one horse, which is essentially what happened here. They don't have that barn full of 60 head to pick from, right? I mean, They have to say, whoa, wait, times have changed a little bit. So, and, if you won $5 million, maybe you can have 2. And if you anything below that, you get 3. And then you'd see a trickle-down effect. You'd have younger riders getting better horses because guys would say, well, look, I can't show this one, but my owner needs to have it compete. Here, ride it for me. I think the trickle-down effect would be that way. And I think that this it was so much fun to watch it, because you've got guys that are, these guys good hands. We've certainly heard of them, but you've got some guys here that were taking big checks, and you're like, who's that? Right? Exactly. Where'd that one come from?
No, and I hear you, and I think that's very healthy. That's healthy for a sport, because that means you can achieve success, but you got to go earn it. There's no gimmies. That's that's a little bit of our cloudy spot in the industry, because from the outside looking in, it looks like there's a lot of influence and it's too hard to break in. That's not true, because yes, it's hard work. Yes, there's no shortcuts. And yes, it's called wet saddle pads, and it's called not being barn blind. And yes, it takes work and extra resources. Sometimes your friends got to whack you upside the stall a little bit, because what you think about a given horse or whatever is not truly true. That's being a little bit of that barn blind that I talk about. And so those are all true factors. But the point to the sport is, And Gabriel just showed it to us. Edward showed it to us. Josie Ann just showed it to us. Debbie Brown just showed it to us. I mean, I can keep going down that list, and I think 100X opened the door for a lot of those that are working hard, and they did it, and they got it done, and they got the reward. So, yes,
absolutely, and it's refreshing, right? I mean, it's fun to see it. It is. It's and it'll get people's. Their tongues will be wagging, right? I mean, it's like you'll be talking about it, but like I said, they'll be going showing next year too, right? They'll be there.
They will, and now it'll make breeders pay attention to some of these programs, because what this event just did across multiple breeders programs. Now, in 3 months, when you're thinking about breeding one of your mares, my guess is one of these programs is going to be higher on your list. Because why wouldn't it be? If you're going to spend the money, breed to a good stud, 1, there's a long list of them. 2, you got genetics to work your way through. 3, there's enough information on crosses that are working and not. And then 4 is eligibility to purses for years, 3 or 4 years. So why wouldn't you? I would think you would.
Yeah, absolutely.
I got a gelding sitting at my house. If that was a mare, I'd be thinking about something different, but I can't. So.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. No, it's gonna. Well, I don't know if it's gonna tip it upside down, but I mean, it's gonna create new ways of thinking for sure, and it's what it's supposed to do. It's great. I can't wait to see what's going to happen in the next 10 years, God willing. Right. I mean, I'm excited about it.
Yeah. Well, me too. So, and we'll keep talking about it.
Sure.
The doors of opportunities. Let's take a look quick. I want to show Edward Wynn's run, level 1, open 1, level 1, 100X stakes, pale face blazing. He wins this with a 219.5. Here he comes. Which a 219.5 is 73.5 on 73.2 on average, to be specific.
Yeah. And if I'd have had him 10 years ago, I'd have thought I had a chance to win the Futurity, right?
Yeah,
and
boy.
he wins the level 1 here, right?
Exactly.
Maybe attitude a little bit coming in.
Yep.
I just called that correct. I called it correct. I zeroed it. If you want to plus half it, that's fine. I got no issue, but just what he's supposed to do.
Yep. Half and half.
Yeah.
Plus a half with a half-point penalty on the second turn.
Exactly.
Yep.
And I thought the first one was very good.
Yep.
I did, and half the second one.
Yep.
Or half first.
You got to remember, this is pattern 12. So you're doing 2 big, fast, small, slow.
Right.
And I agree with you. Yes, this horse is dialed in. His attitude is dialed in. But his ears are flat back against his head. He's
and he's
attention.
good, right?
Yeah.
It's good. It's just like we've been watching excellent and very good, and and he's good.
Yep.
Which I said, it's like at the beginning of this thing, and I call this set good. I mean, a little trickle down early in the downward transition, but still good. Credit earning.
Yep. Solid
but
plus
not,
half.
To me, very good.
Yep.
Correct. Exactly.
Yeah. See, when this horse gets asked, for the demand is when those ears come back, and it's not a bad thing. It's just that's a difference of finesse and some of the quality on the upper end.
Just a teeny bit of willingness, right? Maybe. I mean, he's physically doing everything, but he's asking a question maybe a little bit. Why do I have to do this? And this is not bad. This is still credit earning, still good.
Yep, these are good.
We're looking for tiny, tiny differences to separate horses. That's what we have to work with. Not easy to do. Spot on dead center. Again, another good set of circles for me.
Mm-hmm. Solid all day, both of them. Solid plus halves all day.
Correct.
And middle, yes. Mm-hmm. Pattern placements right on target.
Yep.
turn the corner, go stop. Good. Correct?
Good.
That's what I would have done,
Correct.
plus
Yep.
half.
Absolutely. Good. Plus half.
If you were going to fault this horse, it's really, we're not trying to be judgmental. It's the detail of quality. It's that his front end is more stiff. It's not as free and broke through. It's not that it's bad, but that's the difference.
It's still good. It's just not very good, or it's not excellent. It's still credit earning for me.
Yep. And he tries, but he just doesn't get the left one done. But still good. Yeah.
Yep. Plus half.
Yep. I would have too. And his balance and his hold through isn't quite all in there. And you're right. Your two choices on that one is either 0, correct, or plus half.
Yeah, and I called it correct. I felt like maybe that front end a little bit was maybe the worst on that stop, so I dropped him to correct. So I still marked him a 73.5. I mean, by the time I was done with it, so.
Which is where it was. Pull the scorecard up on that just so that, because this is just illustrating, one, congratulations to these winners. But two, this is telling you from our own system, this is Edouard's card across 5 judges. There was one penalty applied, which was on that left spin. I would have called it. Now, we were looking at it from the left, which is fine. That's another conversation, but only one. So the rest of them don't. So if you take that penalty off and say that was an outlier, so be it. But you can waltz right through it, and that's exactly what you and I talked about. One judge was a little bit stronger on the right spin. But this is all – now, he has none. So he doesn't do any cross zeros. He doesn't do any one-point maneuver spreads. And that's why that run is a half-point difference across 5 cards, because it's a 73 to 73.5 run all day long. If you put 100 judges out there, that's what you're going to get, right?
Right, absolutely.
And the rest of that is – go ahead.
No, easy to define. And I think that's what – I think that's where – that's where our officiating system has now gotten in trouble, because and we've talked about it 100 times on these tours, but it's like, this is easy. It used to be, this run right here used to be a 70 run, used to be a 210 run. I'm not saying score-wise, but you understand what is now average is 219. It's like, instead of a 210, I mean, on the professional level, I mean, it's far above that old 210, but what I'm trying to say here is this is not that upper end anymore. Now we're going to the 230s and 227s and 229s. And so I think the confusing spot to the officials now are trying to separate horses at a high end when they're not used to seeing that many come at them. You know what I mean? They're like, holy cow, now what do we do here? And it's like, well, what is it? So, yeah, this has been an easy run to mark, but it's those high ones that they're starting to struggle with.
Yes, and I agree with you. The example to this is level 1. Edouard wins it. Congratulations.
Yes.
$20,000 check. Congratulations. Keep riding. Keep going. Congratulations to your owner as well. That's part of that reward. And I just think that it's phenomenal. And I agree with you wholeheartedly that is the big obvious step that the entire industry, it's now there. It's taken there's a whole plateau up that we're at. So good. There's just some more work to do.
It's fantastic. It's, and it's just, I'm looking at this over and over and over again. And if I marked I probably marked it. I can't remember what I marked on Custom Harley at the NRBC, but 221 or a 2 or whatever. He got out of there with a lot of money back in the day. And that's a horse like this now, right? I mean, and he's like, okay, you win the level 1, right? Not be in the top 5 of the level 4, right? Or whatever the case may be. It's just changed so much.
Yeah, but what year was that?
Oof. I mean, it had been 15 years ago, probably, right? So just
early 2000s. Right.
for sure.
Somewhere in the early 2000s. But the point was,
Right.
we only had two divisions, which was in the age events.
Right.
There was an open and a limited open, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, but anyway,
Those
it's crazy that I mean that's how far the horsepower has advanced, and it's just it's fun to watch it happen.
Well, it took a 220.5 to make it to the 100X Stakes finals, which that is probably 2 points higher than where it's been historically. And I would tell you it's going to be interesting to watch the Futurity this year, because what will the 3-year-olds kind of say? But you're 100% correct. That the 74 horse is just, that's pretty average. This is a 75 and above kind of horse, and it's just phenomenal to watch.
It is, and we have, like I said, there are so many that are answering the call now, and so many of these horses with the pedigrees and the genetics of sports medicine, everything has just gone through the roof crazy. And I talk about 3-year-olds. What did Andrea mark winning the 3-year-old event here? 230, and I believe I think he showed one-handed. I don't remember. I don't know if he did or not, but I
go ahead.
No.
Andrea wins the Invitational Futurity, had 92 head in it with Inferno 35. He marks 225.
225, okay, so he marked at 225, and like I said, he probably, I don't know if he showed one-handed or two, it doesn't make any difference, but you mark 75s on your 3-year-old in August, I'd say, 1st of September, that it's gonna be a reasonably deep horse show when we get to Oklahoma City in November.
Oh, without a doubt. Well, compare the Invitational Futurity, because that was that was a breeder's program. They had to be offspring of those junior sires. Cade McCutcheon wins the Open Futurity. There was 170 some horses in there. All night partier. He marks a 223.5.
Right.
So you're still talking about 74.5 to 75 on a 3-year-old in August. That's where the industry is. Not too long ago, that was unheard of.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there might have been 2 head do that in the Futurity finals, right?
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah, crazy stuff, fun.
We're going to talk real quick for just a second, and then we'll close this one out, and we'll tell the audience about what we got yet to come, because there's a lot. This event was phenomenal. But let's talk for a minute about the non-pro and the youth, because I hear this chatter a lot in the industry, true amongst the Reining members and community, because where do the non-pros and the youth fit in the industry relative to the movement that the industry is now going with, the big added purses in the aged events? And yes, non-pros can compete for money. That's going to bring up another topic, not on this show, but yes, we could do that stuff. But the point is, do you see, or what's your take, Jody, on how does this sport, while it advances on the professional side, which it is, that's everything we've talked about, it's obvious, but then the non-pros and the youth sectors, because that's the rest of our industry, and they want to play, and they want to do, and they want to get service. So I think it's a big question. And do you have any takes on any of that?
Well, I mean, and we could do a whole show on nothing but those few statements that you just made. And I, like I said, I'd hear, common complaint after common complaint would be from the non-pro riders at the Futurity that said, their Futurity entry fee was just as high as the open riders, but the payout was minuscule in comparison to what the open horses were getting. So, basically it was kind of, I talked about this at length in the past, that, give me credit, let my money go where I want it to go instead of you taking it, right? If I'm smart enough to know what my ability level is and where my horses are, don't let me put my money where I want to. So, it's been a huge issue for a long, long time. And, there's some remedies to that too. But the non-pro riders obviously are of a certain age, the vast majority of them are, because that's, obviously it takes a great deal of money to play this game. So, you're not going to start as a young non-pro rider if you don't have some financial backing behind you, right? I mean, because it's not a cheap thing. But the youth is the thing that I would want to pay the most attention to, and I don't have a clear answer for it. I'm working with some of the youth, and I call them youth, but they're college-age girls now at Oklahoma State University, and getting the background on these girls, and the horse programs and the teams is a great thing for those girls to be able to get an education and get started in it. But without new people, you don't grow, and the youth is the background of all of it. The youth programs, it doesn't matter if it's youth football, youth golf, youth whatever, they want youth because that's where the next level comes from. And right now, we've got some nice youth classes, but we're still handicapping the way that we bring them into our sport. And I think that needs to be addressed with as soon as possible, right? I mean, I'd put the emergency beeper on that one and say, I'd get my groups of thinkers together and say, how do we attract more kids into this? How are we going to do it? Because, you've talked about this at length, and we've had some discussion with AQHA about that, and they need to be targeted because they're it down the road.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I have some of my own ideas on that, especially on the youth, because do I think you could get very creative? The answer is yes. Do I think that the non-pros can also be serviced? Yes, and my biggest point on that is they got to do it different. I think one of the things that we've got to pay attention to as an industry is trying to put them all in the same event or the same environment or same space at the same pay. The cost of stalls and cost of entries and cost of all the things, office fees, judges' fees, all the things that we do as an exhibitor, do they all have to be the same across the spokes in our industry? And the answer is no. But if we keep putting them in the same event, then you're going to keep putting that pressure on. So I agree with you on the youth. The non-pro, I have my own senses on all of that. I won't stir that pot right at the moment. We'll do another show on it, and then everybody can call me all the names they want to. Right. But the youth, I agree with you, and is near and dear. That's where you and I both came from. It was because of the youth programs and the stuff, and the quarter horses were a big thing. The Congress youth was huge when I was a kid. So are some of those things needing to be modernized and then dealt with differently? And I would say yes. So
without question, no, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I mean, and like I said, as working with this great set of young ladies at Oklahoma State University, and there's those good programs at universities across the country. I'm as much as I'm shell-shocked at how good these horses are, I'm also shell-shocked at what an education costs today, right? So, that flavor has to be brought into it too, right? I mean, some way, shape, or form, we need to figure out a way to help educate our kids. And can we do it through this association? Can we do it through the sport? Yeah, maybe. Yes. Maybe there's some ways to do that.
Right? The answer is yes. Do the youth and or young adults have to compete for money? The answer should be no. And the issue is, how do you give them some different form of reward? On youth and college, I would be looking at scholarships, full paid. And what would I do? Put stipulations on it that it's in the ag or the equine world. And if that's an area of interest to them as a career, well, then guess what? You earned your way there. So I fully agree with that one. You could do that with young adults, with developing young adults all day long, which is different than a deposit. So we'll leave that one for another time.
Perfect. Yeah, but I mean, it's good. It's a great thought. It is. Yeah, no question. So,
if the two of us were just multi-billionaires, then we could just do whatever we thought we should be doing, right? Not have to worry about it. But we're not.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we've got 2 more shows coming. We're going to do analytics on competition, one for the 100X stakes, through the go-round, through the finals. All of the details and data. We are working hard to be able to bring graphics that are much more straightforward, simpler, representative than what we've been doing in the past. It's just a matter of, you got to ride more. But we've got a big show coming on the 100X Stakes program, and then we have another analytical show coming on the North American Reining Stakes program. So stay tuned, stay in touch. If you're not on our mailing list, you should go to cowboyoffice.com, put your email in, because you will get direct first. And we're also seeing a lot of direct communication. They have questions, and so in that forum, we answer them one-on-one direct accordingly. So anyway, stay tuned for all of that. And again, thank you to the entire 100X company and the 100X production team. Thank you. I can't say it enough.
Absolutely. Well, stay tuned. Drop us a note with your questions. We love to have those, just like Brian has talked about, at cowboyoffice.com. And, until the next time, stay in the middle.
Enjoy the ride.
Today's episode is brought to you by 40 Productions in cooperation with the Consultment Agency, a full-service agency that helps bring forward-thinking equine brands into the 21st century using digital skills and services such as website development, graphic design, social media, and media production such as the podcast you're consuming here today. Thank you so much for riding along with us today. Sign up at cowboyoffice.com to be the first to know about topics affecting the industry we love so much. You can reach out to us with topics you care about by finding us on TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and all podcast platforms. And remember, share this episode with someone that may enjoy it, because the more we can share our horses with others, the better our world will be.